On Tech News Today, North Korea hacked Sony, but the NSA hacked North Korea first. Plus, the UK spy agency's iPhone hacking secrets are revealed. And why is Amazon becoming a movie studio? It's all coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Monday, January 19th, 2015. This episode is brought to you by Blue Apron. Blue Apron will send you all the ingredients to cook fresh, delicious meals with simple step-by-step instructions right to your door. See what's on the menu this week and get your first 2 meals free by going to blueapron.com/twit. That's blueapron.com/twit. And by Gazelle, the fast and simple way to sell your used gadgets. Find out what your used iPhone, iPad, and other Apple products are worth at gazelle.com. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. Welcome to the show. I'm Mike Elgan, and CNET Editor-in-Chief Lindsey Turrentine is our cranker today. How you doing, Lindsey?
I'm doing great. Great.
Happy Martin
Luther King Day.
Yes,
Look
absolutely. We even have a little bit of Martin Luther King news later on in the show, but first, we have some serious news coming out of Germany and New York. Germany's Spiegel Online and the New York Times reported that the NSA had successfully hacked North Korea's internet as early as 2010. They did it by placing malware able to track the computers used by the 6,000 or so North Korean government hackers in a unit called Bureau 121. And this is really interesting, Lindsey, in light of the fact that when the Sony hack happened, the federal government seemed pretty sure that it was North Korea. The evidence kind of pointed to North Korea, mostly didn't point to North Korea, but the FBI and other U.S. government agencies, no, it's definitely North Korea. And apparently they knew that because they had been paying attention and hacking and tracking the hackers that work for the North Korean government since 2010. It's really kind of a fascinating story. Is there anyone they don't hack? It's really kind of impressive.
It is. And, you know, what's interesting to me about this story is it was given to a couple of outlets. The New York Times wrote a piece that reads very much like, here's what the U.S. government wants you to know about what it knew. Here's what it's actually working on. Here's why we didn't catch it. They say that the North Koreans basically created a spear phishing attack. Sort of they used and they got the network credentials for a Sony system admin. And, you know, you got to think that system admin was a pretty smart person who doesn't just give away credentials. So these North Korean hackers were really smart, but the U.S. government, despite all of the surveillance, essentially didn't catch it. They didn't notice how bad it was, even though they knew the North Koreans had penetrated Sony's network. I
have the feeling that the reason they didn't know was that the North Korean hackers, I mean, after all, we're talking about 6,000 individual human beings, full-time hacking targets around the world. Mostly that's going to be South Korean and U.S. targets, I would imagine, the primary rivals of North Korea. And, you know, they're in there messing around, mucking about in all kinds of servers, I'm sure. And I'm sure that the U.S. government was probably more concerned about Pentagon computers and other things and probably didn't take the penetration of a movie studio all that seriously. And weren't really paying attention. Again, that's just guesswork on my part. I really have no idea why they missed this thing. What's interesting about this as well is we learn more about how the North Korean internet works. They basically use Chinese networks that connect North Korea. In other words, North Korea goes through China. And so the U.S. sort of hacked the connection between North Korea and the internet, which takes place in China. So they were essentially hacking China to monitor the North Koreans. And they picked through connections in Malaysia that are favored by North Korean hackers, and they penetrated directly into the north with the help of South Korea and other American allies. So there are others involved in this. This wasn't just a sort of NSA effort. This was a international effort to hack North Korea. Very fascinating. And you know, there's all kinds of details about this coming out of Spiegel Online and New York Times, including the fact that the U.S. implanted what they called beacons that automatically went in there and mapped the computer networks and surveillance software, and they even had destructive malware in there. So they presumably had the ability to do something like Stuxnet at some point, somewhere, if the opportunity presented itself, which it may not have done. And my big question now, though, Lindsey Turrentine, is What happens now? Is this whole thing, is their cover blown? Has the U.S. been found out and stopped from now hacking? In other words, has the revelation of these stories essentially taken North Korea off the table for the NSA?
I'm going to assume, and this is again just an assumption, that because this network of beacons was established around 2010, the U.S. felt safe explaining what it did because it's probably working on something else already. That's my guess, and that they waited a little bit to make sure that they can keep on doing what they're doing, even if this gets shut down. But the other interesting thing about it to me is that, like you said, this is running through China. So presumably China knows that the North Koreans are using its infrastructure to do this. And what's its motivation? Does this mean that everything North Korea is ferreting out, China knows? I would assume so. That's the advantage that China gets allowing this to happen. So I'm sure the U.S. kind of wants China to know, hey, we know what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, China and North Korea have a weird relationship. They're basically, China is the closest thing that North Korea has to an ally, and yet China's kind of like looks at North Koreans like, don't mess things up for us. Just stay in your cage. They even have, recently the Chinese are deploying huge militias to patrol the North Korean border, and mostly to keep out defectors who are just streaming across into China. But I'm sure that China has its hands full protecting itself from North Korean hackers, and they're probably less concerned about North Korea hacking the United States. Who knows? We'll get more details on this story as it unfolds. But first, before we get to our next story, which involves more hacking, more information from Spiegel Online, I want to tell you about Blue Apron, our shiny new sponsor here on Tech News Today. Blue Apron is an awesome, awesome service that I've been using lately. It's basically a service that will send all the ingredients you need to make incredibly fresh, delicious gourmet meals yourself, start to finish. Super easy to do. They give you exactly the food you need, everything, including the fresh produce, whatever entree there is. Let's take a look at the pictures I took late last week when I made something super, super delicious. It's chicken mulligatawny, I think is how you pronounce it. And what we're looking at now, if you're looking at the videos, this is a picture of what is inside the insulated bag. There are some ice packs in there to keep the cold stuff really cold, and then you have the produce, each in an individual bag. This is everything laid out in my kitchen. You just basically follow these really simple step-by-step ingredients. And let me tell you, I'm a perfect example of why this is a great, great idea. At my house, I'm an okay cook, and I have a very narrow range. I can make, I don't know, 10, 15 things pretty well. My wife is like the greatest cook who ever lived. The result of that is the fact is that she does all the cooking, like she does all the work of cooking because she's so good at it, and because, frankly, the meals that I make aren't good enough for her. She's got a really good palate. And so what this enables me to do, what Blue Apron enables me to do, is give my wife a break. I can make meals that are up to her standards, and she doesn't have to lift a finger. Even when I normally cook, I'm constantly going to her, asking her questions about how do you do this? How do you make quinoa? How do you do that? You know, it's because I don't have as much knowledge, nearly as much knowledge as she does. But with Blue Apron, I don't need to go running to her asking questions. She can just take the evening off, and then I just produce this amazing meal. I've done 3 now. 3 meals, and each and every one of them was fantastic, far better than you can find in 99.9% of the restaurants out there. And again, it's super easy. It turns out that the hardest thing about cooking is the sort of mental tax. It's not the preparation of food. That's fun. But actually mentally processing what you have to do if you're not a super experienced cook is the hard part. And that's why making food with Blue Apron is so incredibly easy, because they take all the work out of it. And it's like a miracle. At the end of it, this amazing meal comes out. And anyway, I'm really excited about it, as you can tell, because I love good food and I love the feeling that I'm this great cook. I'm not, but Blue Apron makes me feel like I am, and I really appreciate that. So see what's on the menu this week and get your first 2 meals free by going to blueapron.com/twit. That's right, 2 free meals just for going to blueapron.com/twit. And we thank Blue Apron for their support of Tech News Today, and I thank Blue Apron for those amazing meals. Well, in other news, Lindsey, it looks like the Brits really know how to hack an iPhone. What did we learn this weekend?
We learned also from Der Spiegel that Edward Snowden released some documents to a group of journalists, including the journalist who is Oscar nominated for her portrayal of Edward Snowden, by the way, that the British spy agency GCHQ tracked iPhones as late as 2013 by taking advantage of a flawed identifier that Apple put on its iPhones. It's called the UDID, the Unique Device Identifier. And it used that identifier to connect the phones to essentially a hacked computer and to actually locate and track the location of those phones in real time as those phones synced up with the computers. Apple doesn't use the UDID system anymore. And in fact, as about sometime in 2013, Apple started rejecting apps that used that system. So it's not in place anymore. But the Brits used this for quite some time to track the physical location of devices.
It's really interesting because this indicates a larger trend for the NSA and the GCHQ about how they hack unhackable places. For example, when everybody started throwing up encryption, Apple's a perfect example. Their encryption is fantastic for iMessage. There's lots of great encryption out there for messaging. So what the spy agencies do when they come up against really hard encryption is like, okay, well, this stuff has to connect to someone somewhere. We'll just hack the thing it connects to. That's what Prism was all about, by the way. They weren't actually hacking these online services. They were just essentially hacking the connection of those services to the larger internet. In this case, they were hacking the connection of the phones to servers that were syncing to those phones. It's a brilliant idea, and you know, these are, again, two separate hacks. One is the hacking of the computers that iPhones sync to, and the other one was the tracking of the UDID service. And so now I don't know where we're at with the UDID, as you mentioned, that it's kind of been shut down by Apple. We don't know about the other part. I imagine that's been shut down as well. So it looks like they're out of luck with those iPhones. And I think this kind of thing, the fact that, you know, this is sort of behind the scenes, behind the news, because this kind of hacking has now been shut off as an option for the GCHQ. And suddenly the UK Prime Minister, David Cameron, is calling for crackable front doors, back doors, whatever you want to call it, but some way to listen in on encrypted communication. They're kind of freaking out because all these services are closing doors on the spy agencies. And of course now President Obama is jumping on board with that to a certain extent, at least paying lip service to the idea that there should be a way for government spy agencies to listen in on encrypted communication. So, you know, this is really what it's all about. Used to be 3, 4, 5 years ago, I think these spy agencies had free reign, and now it's a totally different story. And I think that's what's behind this renewed call for backdoors or front doors or whatever they want to call it to get into the encrypted communication. What do you think, Lindsey?
Well, here's what I think. I think that if you are somebody who might potentially be spied upon, don't use an iPhone. I mean, it's such a huge target. It's surprising to me that that somebody who a spy agency is using the most common platform in the world. Kind of interesting.
Absolutely. Well, in other news, Amazon is now a real movie studio. The company announced plans to make 12 movies, and here's the weird part, it will play in movie theaters and also, where else? Amazon Prime Instant Video. The filmmaking will start this year, according to a company press release that came out this morning. The movies would become available on Amazon between 4 and 8 weeks after theatrical release. Amazon hired producer Ted Hope to lead a division called Amazon Original Movies. Joshua Brustein is a writer for Business Week, and he joins us now to talk about the story. How you doing, Joshua?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
We can now. Technical glitch there. Now, why would Amazon care about movie theater distribution for its movies?
Well, Amazon doesn't care as much about the theaters, except that if something's in the theaters, it tends to get a lot of attention, and then Amazon Prime will be the first streaming service to get at those theatrical releases. So the play here is really a hope to get more people to sign up for Amazon Prime.
Joshua, do you think that the success or the marketing success of the interview might help Amazon with this model to say, look, we can release things really quickly online after they come out in theaters? People want that.
It's a good question. I think that the interview is probably going to go down in history as being a pretty unique situation. You know, I think that people are pretty used to streaming movies online now. And so the path from theaters to streaming does seem like a good one for Amazon, though.
So let's get this straight. Let's just follow the money here. So movie theaters exist in order to sell popcorn. They generally lose money on the movies themselves. They want to bring people in so they can be charged exorbitant prices for monopolistic junk food. But movies in theaters gain a lot of attention, which Amazon is using as a marketing gimmick to get you to sign up for Amazon Prime so that they can sell you diapers and paper towels. It's all very strange, and it's really yet another level of weirdness for the movie industry, because I think at some point somebody somewhere realized that a movie studio is nothing more than an investor who coughs up a bunch of money and backs a movie and then has control over the distribution of that movie, and money is made in that way. And movie studio isn't any longer a creative enterprise at all. It's just somebody who funds creative people, and that's why Netflix and Amazon and everybody else is getting into it. It's really pretty fascinating. Now, what do we know about producer Ted Hope and what do we know about this Amazon Original Movies division?
So Ted Hope founded a company called Good Machine, which is a production company. They made Eat, Drink, Man, Woman, and also Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And so I think you're absolutely right. I mean, basically what Amazon is, and what Amazon Studios is in this case, is a company that writes the checks. And, they're pitching themselves to filmmakers saying, here's another place where you have an option to sell your work. We can offer you something that maybe you're not finding elsewhere, and hopefully they'll be able to draw away some of the talent that way.
So when this effort was still sort of in the rumor phase before Amazon formally announced it, I heard somebody say, and I don't remember where, that Amazon had a sort of a weird advantage because everything Amazon does is data driven, and they're testing out all these concepts online before they're, say, potentially putting them in a theater. They can go after people in Hollywood who others have rejected for whatever reason. They're not in their prime anymore, or some sort of scandal drove them out of the limelight. And Amazon can then work with people who, I don't know, maybe wouldn't get a chance somewhere else. Do you think that is still going to be the case in these theater efforts?
Whenever Amazon has gotten into a different area of the media business, and it's been doing this a lot lately, it always brings up the fact that it has a lot of data and can use that data in certain ways. It mentioned it with Fire TV. It mentioned it with the television shows that it was making, where it would be able to sort of make some of these calls based on data. Netflix also said the same thing when it was putting together House of Cards. So sure, I mean, they do have, that's the world where these companies come from. On the other hand, I mean, you'll hear plenty of people in the creative world say that, it's very hard to just look at data and pick out what's going to be a hit piece of popular culture. And in fact, a lot of times, you're looking for something that hasn't happened before. So that might not be actually a strong point.
Interesting. Joshua Brustein is at businessweek.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at Joshua Brustein. Thank you so much for joining us, Joshua.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, Lindsey, it looks like Elon Musk wants to go to Mars, but that's not even the most ambitious part of what he's trying to do. What's happening there?
I just love this guy. On Friday, Elon Musk announced at a SpaceX event that he's launching another gigantic, ambitious infrastructure project, and this time it's to build a second internet, a non-terrestrial internet based in space. And his goal is to create a grid of low-flying space satellites that will bring extremely high-speed internet across to the entire world and places that can't currently get it. So he's proposing 4,000 satellites arranged in a grid orbiting about 750 miles above Earth that are sending signals to each other through space, which Musk says is, and this makes a lot of sense, is a lot faster even than the highest speed fiber networks we have on Earth, because there's just nothing in space, so it can travel very quickly. And the part of this entire project is that Musk has said very publicly, I'm going to do this, but really it's a way to fund building a city on Mars. You just can't top that.
You cannot. That's true. You know, the idea that he's going to do this project, part of the ambition here is the money part of the ambition. So there are lots of organizations and companies trying to provide low-cost worldwide internet connectivity. I mean, I remember when Bill Gates tried to do it with Teledesic, worked on it for a decade, and the whole thing sort of collapsed and never went anywhere. Zuckerberg is working on internet.org. Google has Project Loon. Qualcomm has a partnership with OneWeb, and they're trying to do the same thing. There are lots of organizations trying to do this, and Elon Musk comes along and basically says, hey, I'm Elon Musk. I don't care about any of this stuff. I'm really going to make it happen. And not only going to make it happen, I'm going to give everybody in the world satellite. The profits are going to be so enormous, it's going to fund a Mars mission. I mean, it's like, and a colony and the whole bit. I mean, it's really kind of mind-blowing. And by the way, he's talking about funding a mission to Mars by 2026. Right? That sounds like super futuristic, but no, that is 11 years from now. So it's really not that far into the future.
He's what's so interesting about Elon Musk is that he has the same visions everybody else has had in this sort of sci-fi or futurism world, but he just won't stand for waiting for somebody else to do it. He's like, why aren't we doing this now? And he just does it. But the other interesting thing about this is that he has an old colleague and friend, Greg Weiler, who also recently announced a very similar venture through his startup. I think it's called OneWeb. And these guys know each other. They have disagreements about infrastructure. So Elon Musk is saying, okay, we're going to have competing space internet. You know, he's got the business part of it all mapped out in his mind.
It's really incredible. And of course, the underlying fact that is driving all this stuff is the fact that there are more people who don't have internet connectivity than who do. In our world, it seems like everybody's got it. But in fact, the majority of people don't. And so how will the world be different when every single person theoretically has internet connectivity? I look forward to that age, and I also look forward to competition in the race to Mars. Of course, Elon Musk isn't alone there. He's alone in terms of being a private citizen who wants to do it. But of course, China wants to go to Mars. India wants to go to Mars. And the United States, of course, is intending to go to Mars as well. So I agree. Let's have everybody provide global satellite, and also let's have everybody go to Mars. I think that would be great. That'll increase the chances that that's going to happen. Well, in just a sec, we've got some feedback for you, lots and lots of feedback, actually. But first, I want to talk to you about Gazelle. Gazelle, okay, look, you got a bunch of gifts, you got gadgets and stuff for the holidays, or you've bought one recently. The amount of phones and tablets in the fourth quarter of every single year is sort of a spike. And so what do you do with the old thing that you had? Okay, the thing to do is to sell it to Gazelle because they're going to give you a ton of money for it. And if you've lost or broken your phone, you can even buy a certified pre-owned device from Gazelle. They make sure that they check everything, make sure it's in perfect working order, and you only save a bundle. It doesn't make sense to buy a brand new phone if you can buy a pre-owned one that works exactly like a new phone, and it's much better. I mean, sometimes people compromise because of their budget on the phone. They get a lesser phone. Right? You don't need to do that. You can get the best phone out there and still stay within your budget by buying it from Gazelle. And of course, selling is always a good idea. You get paid in cash, payment is fast, and Gazelle's paid nearly $175 million to more than 1 million customers. And of course, it's super, super easy. I've gone on the show before about how easy Gazelle is, and to me, that's really the best part, because who has time to mess around with all this stuff? You just throw it in the box and off it goes, and you get paid. So find out what your iPhone's worth. Take a minute. Go to Gazelle.com to find out. And we thank Gazelle for their support of Tech News Today. Well, we've got lots and lots of feedback on a whole bunch of topics here. We've got the TNT fan base is just brimming over with ideas and thoughts about some of our coverage, starting with Milton Skritzmeyer, who wrote to us and said that on Thursday's TNT, I said, personally, that President Obama would never side with English Prime Minister Cameron in the call for Silicon Valley companies to provide a backdoor in encrypted communication. And then he basically stood at a podium a day or two after I said that he would never do it. And he pretty much did it. Now, I'm not clear on exactly what these politicians on both sides of the Atlantic are sort of being mealy-mouthed about this. The original speech from Cameron said, no, we need back doors. We need to, there needs to be no place that we can't snoop. And then now he's sort of tap dancing around that, saying, no, we need legal, this, that, and the other thing. We need warrants and do it all above board. And the president is essentially saying something similar, although the president isn't saying he's going to do it. He's saying it should be done, whereas Cameron's saying, if you reelect the Conservative Party, I will do this. And so there's a slight difference there. There's not a lot of clarity, but Milton, you are correct. I was surprised that the president even said anything positive about Cameron's horrible and politically disastrous proposal. We got an email from Scott Nikoloff, who said that almost every time Google Glass is discussed, there's a debate as to whether or not there should be a camera. And he said that the solution to that is simple. Just make the camera module detachable. So you can take it off anytime you want, you can put it on anytime you want, and it won't cause the problem of having that camera always pointing at people. Kaylin McGregor also had a comment about the camera part, and she said that I heard you saying that shooting videos with Google Glass shouldn't be considered creepy. After all, you have to point your head toward the subject, so it's far easier to take. It's harder to take weird shots with glass than it is a smartphone. But she basically just made the point that it's still, you never know if you're talking to somebody whether they're filming you. And again, that's my point was, I disagree with that, Kaylin. You do know, if you're sitting there talking to somebody and they're filming you, there is a spectacularly bright light on their right eye showing, and if you're looking at somebody, you can see a reverse image of what they're looking at. It's about the size of a quarter of the size of a postage stamp, but there it is. And if you're in a dim room at all, it lights up half the room. It's incredibly conspicuous when you're using Google Glass. And so I think that its value as a spy tool is overblown. On the other hand, when you're in a public place with lots of people milling around in bright light, it's less noticeable. So that's a situation when it is actually less noticeable.
I think there just needs to be a better flag, by the way. I think there needs to be a very small indicator light on the glass. It can be pretty subtle, but that is just clearly the camera light, just like you would have on your laptop next to the camera. And they can do that. Why not?
Yeah, I think they will. There's been hints coming out of Google that they would do that with the commercial version of Google Glass, and I really expect that that's what's going to happen. Brent Johnson also sent this email, wanted to throw his hat into the ring of iPhone users having problems with third-party keyboards. Lots of people having trouble with keyboards, including SwiftKey, which I think is the biggest brand for iPhone since they launched the ability to have third-party keyboards. Just all kinds of problems, and he can't recommend SwiftKey until they fix the problems. And so we thank him for that email and for everybody who sent an email. Well, we've got some updates for you. Apple recently sent notices of termination to developers whose accounts are registered in Crimea. The company cited U.S. sanctions against the region in the wake of Russia's annexation. The sanctions came via an executive order signed by President Obama on December 19th. Apple's notice said that developers there won't be allowed to use Apple software or publish apps in the Apple App Store. Lindsey, Turrentine, we hear this news about Apple, but I haven't heard news about everybody else. I mean, Apple isn't the only platform that's got to sort of turn off developers. Haven't heard anything about Google obeying the sanctions here. Have you heard anything like that? And how long do you think, suppose this might last?
I haven't heard anything like that either. I think it's going to last until, well, either the sanctions are lifted or, I mean, I suppose that there's some intelligence concerns here too, right? I mean, if there are people developing in Crimea, it's probably, it's a little bit lawless at the moment, and they're probably concerned about what exactly is being developed. But I do think it's just a matter of when the sanctions wind up, and I wouldn't be surprised if you hear very similar things from Google and everyone else. They're just not first.
I also, this is another example of the hypocrisy of these kinds of sanctions, because of course, President Obama wants to punish Russia by punishing the victims of Russian aggression, essentially. I mean, he's not putting the sanctions on Russia itself and shutting down all Russian developers of iPhone apps, and because that would be expensive and that would be bad for business. And so, you know, they're basically going after a economically marginalized corner of the world that's already being victimized by the very thing that he's claiming to be protesting, essentially. Well, the government of Bangladesh ordered telecoms yesterday to shut down messaging and voice services like Viber and Tango in order to hobble anti-government protests there. This is yet another example of a dictatorship essentially trying to stifle protests by preventing people from being able to communicate. I'm sure that will quickly discover peer-to-peer services like everybody else has. Bloomberg.
You know what? If we have space-based internet, how do governments crack down on? It'll be interesting to see how governments, if they don't actually own the land, deal with communications coming across that network. Exactly.
That's exactly right. And you know, they may be able to, the interesting part of that is that satellites are not within a national boundary, right? They're in space. And so, how do you use the control you have over the national territory that you control if you're a government to essentially shut down something that's happening in orbit. So that'll be an interesting case to see what the governments do. They'll certainly want to shut that stuff down, but we'll see how that goes. Well, Bloomberg reports that HTC plans to unveil in March a new flagship phone called the M9, which will have a 20-megapixel camera. The company will also announce a smartwatch that links with Under Armour's fitness service, according to a Bloomberg source. Sounds pretty interesting. Throwing in their lot with Under Armour. Do you know anything about Under Armour's fitness service, Lindsey?
I know that it uses sensors in clothing to give you feedback on your workouts. So it's a really interesting concept. I mean, this is what we've been seeing coming for a long time, smaller, more subtle sensors all over the place, not just on your wrist. So HTC, I suspect, is planning big announcements around Mobile World Congress, and this is going to be part of what they're planning. That's my guess.
All right. Well, OnePlus plans to offer its OnePlus One phone for sale without an invitation tomorrow for 2 hours only between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern Time in the United States. Buyers in Hong Kong and Taiwan will also have their own 2-hour window between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. local time, and European buyers between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. GMT. Those are actually, even though they're all between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m., those are local times, and those sales are staggered. And the reason they're staggered is to prevent problems like the ones that occurred during the previous such attempts to sell the phone without an invitation. I've been tracking OnePlus for quite a while since they launched, and so far they haven't done anything right except make a great phone that's really cheap. But in terms of everything, every time they try to go off the, out of their invitation-only thing, there have been disasters. Every time they try to have a big, marketing gimmick, it's been, tone deaf and sexist and all the rest. Even the question about whether OnePlus is a separate company from its parent company is still not been resolved, as far as I know. It's just a weird company. It's a weird situation. But let's hope, for the sake of people who want to buy OnePlus One phones, which again are great phones, that this thing goes a lot better than previous attempts.
It seems pretty straightforward. This is just buy it now. Hopefully that's going to work.
Yeah, they're also going to be selling accessories during this period of time as well. Well, in other news, a group of German researchers are using artificial intelligence to make Nintendo's famous plumber, Mario, self-aware and able to play all by himself. In addition to self-awareness, Mario will also gain the capacity for curiosity and even hunger, which will change his decision-making during the game. When he's hungry, for example, he'll chase more coins, but when he's curious, he'll educate himself more about the Mushroom Kingdom by exploring it on his own. Members of the Cognitive Modeling Group at Germany's University of Tübingen are also using speech recognition to enable human players to help Mario out by saying instructions out loud. How cool is that?
Wouldn't it be crazy if the singularity happened with Mario?
Yes.
Right, that's it. Mario. It would be the most humorous way the singularity could occur.
Skynet is going to, all of a sudden, every speaker in the world is going to go, it's a me, Mario. Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. Well, the Chinese tech giant Tencent intended to pander to American users by honoring Martin Luther King on his birthday. The plan was to display a cascading series of American flags when U.S. users typed in the words civil rights. But the company made one small mistake. They enabled the feature for China, too. So when Chinese users entered civil rights, they got a whole bunch of American flags. And they were confused. Well, our TNT fan of the day is Desmond near Toronto in Canada. He says he goes everywhere with his sketch pad, journal, camera, and tablet tuned to his favorite show, Tech News Today. How do you watch or listen to TNT? Just record a video or take a picture of your setup and post it on Google+, Twitter, or Facebook, and use the hashtag #HowIWatchTNT, and we will find it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Tech News Today. Lindsey Turrentine, what's going on in the world of CNET reviews?
Oh, we're getting ready. We're excited about next week because we've got some people going up to Seattle to hear Microsoft talking about what's next for consumers in Windows 10. That event happens on Wednesday, so we're planning that, and it's going to be really interesting. We'll see if Microsoft can finally get its mojo back.
Yeah, I'm once again still like Lucy with the football, rooting for Microsoft on this thing, and so hopefully they'll hit one out of the park. Well, Lindsey Turrentine, thank you so much for co-anchoring. We will see you next week.
See you next week.
All right. Well, you can subscribe to Tech News Today on iTunes, and please leave a review and let us know how you like the show. We love the feedback. Choose your favorite way to subscribe at twit.tv/TNT. You can follow us on Twitter at Tech News Today TV. Join our Google Plus community. Just search Google Plus for Tech News Today. It's a thriving community. Subscribe to our subreddit at technewstoday.reddit.com. And you can follow me personally on Google Plus. Just go to elgan.com. That's ELGAN.com, and that'll redirect to my G Plus profile. You can also follow me on Twitter at Mike Elgan, Facebook at facebook.com/Mike.Elgan. And please send us your thoughts and opinions to TNT at twit.tv or call 260-TNT-SHOW. Don't miss our evening newscast, Tech News Tonight, at 4 p.m. Pacific tonight and every weeknight right here on the Twit Network. My name is Mike Elgan. Happy Martin Luther King Day to all our fans in the United States and China. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.